where every Monday we are going to take viewer questions about finance and the economy and ask our expert to weigh in so you can be more confident with your money, especially important for LGBTQ community. We are proud to have Queer News Tonight contributor David Treece joining us now. With 30 years of experience, David works as a fee-based investment advisor representing and a representative from Cetera Advisors and is an accredited investment fiduciary. He understands financial markets and is an expert in financial planning. David has been featured in the Miami Herald, Sun Sentinel, PBS's nightly business report, The Washington Post, and on NBC6 in an Emmy award-winning series about his work. David, welcome to the show tonight.
Thank you, Al. Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, I have not actually seen, this is part one, first time that we have done this, and I actually haven't seen this done specifically for the LGBTQ community in a digital video fashion before. So we're really excited to present this to the South Florida community and the LGBT community nationally.
There's so many issues for the LGBT community on financial planning too, so I think we need to get some focus on this as we talk about diversity on all sorts of issues. And I've got a lot to say, I think.
Yeah, well, that's good because we're a talking show, so lots to say will make it great. I'm curious, before we get into some of the viewer questions that have been asked, is this a unique year for COVID-19 or because of COVID-19 in terms of planning financially in the LGBTQ community?
You know, I think it's been a tough year for everybody, and we've seen a lot of people really look at the planning that they need to do, so it's affected everybody. And one of the things we give a lot of advice about making sure that you're prepared for emergencies, like possibly the loss of a job. So there are other things like that, and to make sure that you've got a larger point of view about your long-term future. We say you are your best stock. So we want you to make sure that you're investing in yourself so that if something does go wrong, that you may be able to maybe make a turn and still land on your feet. I've seen that happen to a lot of people who ended up not where they wanted to be, but still making the best of it. So it's not easy for anybody. This has really been a rough time. We've had calls to our office about people worrying about passing away, that what if something happens to me? What if I get sick? And trying to make sure that their documents are up to date or their beneficiary designations. And I've always preached, you've got to think about these things because anything can go wrong. And then you don't necessarily think about a pandemic, but clearly we want you to be prepared.
That gives us an opportunity. We have solicited from viewers some questions. We're going to ask several of them tonight. Josie, why don't we begin with you?
Okay, so the first question from our viewers is, how is financial planning different for LGBTQ people?
This is the question. I'm so glad to be able to talk about this. As we were just mentioning, that this isn't a topic that gets enough of coverage. There are still a lot of differences about financial planning for LGBT people. A lot of it has to do with the lack of marriage rights for so many years. I've had clients who retired, they took a pension based on a single life payout where they thought they couldn't get married, and so that's irreversible. So now if somebody passes away, that pension is lost. Often there's just no planning for marriage because we didn't have marriage rights until relatively recently. So I see that with Social Security claiming strategies. There are a lot of issues with, it could be family issues is a big one, and we may have hostile family members. I see that quite commonly. Our family structures may be quite a bit different. So, for example, in some states, you cannot name a best friend as the executor of your will. Like here in Florida, it has to be somebody who is either a resident of Florida or a blood relative. If they live out of state, they're not eligible. So there are a lot of issues like that that you have to kind of plan for that are more prominent in the LGBT community. I worry about aging in the LGBT community. Often we haven't had children, so the risk of aging alone is higher. And we've had a lot of LGBT seniors. I actually showed a documentary on LGBT seniors going back into the closet. And the reason is you get to be vulnerable when you're older. And often other older people are less welcoming And we've even seen some of the caregivers who are often from more conservative communities, for
Wow,
example.
that's very interesting.
I've seen people from the Caribbean, and we had one older man we were practically taking care of, a gay man, and the caregiver was reading the Bible all the time. And at one point, she just disappeared on us, and we think it had something to do with my husband and I and our jokes, our gay jokes, and we called the agency. It's like, what happened? And they sent somebody else. But that's an issue, and this was a Jewish man. And it's like to have somebody there reading the Bible, and it's very easy for somebody to say the wrong thing. HIV is another issue. I think that sometimes a gay man who might be HIV positive is less likely to necessarily tell an advisor that unless they're working with somebody who they know is LGBTQ friendly.
You know, it's interesting because you had like 9 points that I'm making mental notes that we're going to have to ask more questions about in exploring, because you outlined a lot of things that I didn't even think about that is important for the LGBT community. Another viewer did ask a very specific question, though, that I wanted to zero in on. And the question is, what are the most important things that we should be doing right now with our money and our financial planning, given the specific issues with COVID-19? What's the real finite recommendations of what you should do tomorrow, this week, this month?
Well, I touched on a few things. One of them is that emergency account. If you can still do it, if you haven't done it, set that money aside in case something goes wrong. This is where we used to say in the Great Recession back in 2007, 2008, try to have 3 to 6 months of emergency money available. Now we're even going to 6 to 9 months because it can take a long time to get a job. Another thing is make sure you know what your benefits are, your health insurance benefits, your group benefits. Make sure that you've got the ability to get short-term, long-term disability, that you've got good insurance coverage. So look at that. In terms of investing, if you're a younger person and you're worried about the markets going up and down and possibly another serious correction, if you're saving regularly, you're doing dollar cost averaging, as we say, that let's say you're contributing to a 401k plan at work, just keep it up, because if the market goes down, you're buying those shares on sale. Now, on the other hand, if you're closer to retirement and you're worried about maybe running out of money, you have to be more careful, because we do worry about another market correction. Corrections are normal to some extent. If the market goes down maybe 10%, this is pretty common. If it goes down 20%, we get into a bear market, that can hurt, and people don't even want to open their statements at that point.
Actually, I want to, and Josie's going to ask you a question very specific to what you have just brought up. We've reported at Queer News Tonight over the course of the pandemic, and especially in April when it really hit economically the LGBT community hard, we reported unemployment percentage rates in the LGBT community, especially because we're so social economy driven. Restaurants, bars, entertainment, attractions, etc., theater, that unemployment in the LGBT community skyrocketed to 25 to 28%. But through that entire time, we saw dramatic strength in the stock market, which is what you just talked about in correction. And a viewer asked a very specific question about that. Josie, let's explore that.
Yeah, so our next question from our viewer is, what is going on with the stock market and the economy right now? How can the stock market be up with such a terrible economy?
We like to think that the stock market represents the economy in some way. If the economy is booming, you expect the stock market to boom, and it's painful, especially for people who are out of work, to see all of this bad economic news, and yet the stock market is going up. And a lot of advisors and money managers are asking what's really going on here. In my opinion, a lot of it has to do with this is government policy. So rather than the stock market being a measure of valuation, it's a measure of the efficacy of some of the public policy. Like the Fed, Jay Powell at the Fed, they're doing everything from the beginning to backstop the economy. They've even bought junk bonds. These are low-grade corporate bonds, which they've never done before. And Jay Powell has said they're going to keep interest rates low for the indefinite future and do everything that they can. They're pumping trillions of dollars into the economy. That's what's keeping the stock market up, as well as government policy. That is the payroll protection program, the stimulus checks, And it's fascinating. We can measure this. We can see that in a typical recession, bankruptcies go up, foreclosures go up. We see the spending levels decline, and we're not seeing that right now. We're kicking the can down the road because of all of these government programs in the moratorium on foreclosures and evictions. A fear has been, if we stop doing this, that all of this is going to be another crisis again, that we're going to have the foreclosure crisis like in 2007 and 2008, and then it becomes a financial crisis. There's no sign of that right now, but that's a big concern. We do look at the valuations of the stock market, and there's a lot of ways we measure this. The cyclically adjusted price to earnings ratio is one of them, and there's no question by almost any measure the valuation of the stock market is very high. Many people say it's in bubble territory.
We're LGBT America will just tell you, we have on Tuesday nights, it'll be tomorrow night at 7 o'clock on Queer News Tonight, we have done Q&A for 26 consecutive weeks on coronavirus and the LGBT community with Dr. Howard Grossman. He is a renowned expert in the United States, having worked at Pioneer in American HIV and virus study in the United States. The reason why we have done this and have now done it for 26 consecutive weeks is because COVID-19 for the last half of year has been our #1 topic in our LGBT community. Tonight we launch this new Q&A because the second most important thing that the LGBT community is talking about is, how am I going to financially survive after the health effects of COVID-19? And so David's participation with us here in Q&A is really, really valuably important. We will continue on Monday nights to bring you your questions and have David give us some facts. Because for most of our community, I imagine, we're very shy about asking about what should I do about money and how do I survive what I'm watching and experiencing in our society in COVID-19. So this is our first time for doing financially Q&A, and personally, I think we've had a really great start. We look forward to having you back next week as well, and thank you for your time tonight, David. You're going to help demystify the world of finance, and you being a attractive gay married man won't hurt either. Just saying.
Thanks for having me. And if I can say something positive and give encouragement, one sign I see is that once we get through this, and we will get through it, there's a lot of pent-up demand. People want to spend money, they want to work, they want to travel, and I think it can be like almost like maybe a post-World War II boom again. So good times hopefully will be on the way eventually.
Yeah, very interesting. Dr. Grossman has the same optimistic outlook. We will survive COVID. That's what you've just told us in terms of our financing. All right, great. And that's Q&A. And thank you very much, David, for being with us tonight.